Everyone, welcome back to All Things Avennia. Thank you so much for joining me today for our second to last All Things Avennia of this season, we'll call it. Today we're actually bringing back a very popular episode from the first half of the year, or of our time together, and doing new varietal support group. So I often, when I'm out and about talking to new wine drinkers or doing tastings, tasting Avennia wines, it seems like there's a lot of people that are still either hesitant to try some new wines or new grapes, or they just don't have a chance to. Maybe where they're purchasing wine, they're just not a wide variety of things, or maybe there's things there that they just don't realize might be similar to what they enjoy and want to branch out and try new things. So that was sort of the reason to do this type of All Things Avennia. It's not necessarily about Avennia wine per se, unless you have not tried Syrah before, or if you've not tried, Marsanne Roussanne or some of these other grapes that we do produce. This is more about trying some completely new wines. So I grabbed a wine actually from Turkey that I'll be sharing a little bit later. But my hope is that you'll maybe grab something that you were unfamiliar with, something you haven't tried before, and then you could sort of taste it. We could experience it together. You can talk about what the wine is like. But before we do that, this time around, I wanted to do just a miniature presentation, and this is more of a quick guide. So I'm going to share my screen right now. So this is our new varietal support group 2.0, a quick guide. So the idea behind this is that there's going to be your grapes that most people recognize, something like Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm going to go through all these major grapes and give you an idea of what are the kind of grapes or other wines you might want to try based on these particular wines that you might see everywhere. So we'll start with the popular Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc, and this caveat for this whole part of the presentation is that absolutely, depending on where these grapes are from, what region, how hot or cold it is, the winemaker's intention, vineyard, there's a lot of specifics that will alter how these wines will taste. So this isn't a hard and fast rules like these will always taste super similar to Sauvignon Blanc, but these are more or less similar styles of wine or different grapes that will act similarly that would be worth trying out. So for Sauvignon Blanc, if you like Sauvignon Blanc, what you like is something probably higher in acidity, so something really crisp, something citrusy, maybe a little bit of grassy, maybe a little floral, some just really nice aromatics. And these are some other grapes that I think you should try. So the major ones that you might be able to find in more stores are things like Riesling, specifically dry Riesling, because we're not drinking sweet Sauvignon Blanc. Most Sauvignon Blancs aren't made in that style unless you're in Bordeaux or Sauternes or certain places where they are doing something like that, even though that's mostly Semillon. But dry style of Rieslings. These can come from Germany, Austria, Alsace, other places, including the US, like in Washington. We have some really beautiful Rieslings here. They'll have similar citrusy notes, but usually we'll have a little more floral, maybe a little more peachy, stone fruit. But they can also add some other things, the waxiness, this slate or petrol notes. Petrol is kind of like this weird term that wine tasters use with Riesling that can scare a lot of people. It often happens in older Rieslings, TDN, and of course I should have looked up the actual scientific name of TDN, but this is the compound in the grape skins in Riesling that make it smell and taste like petrol. It's naturally occurring, so it's not something that's added to by winemaking styles. It's something that just happens in Riesling. So it could be slightly different, but still more or less, it's a higher acidic grape like Sauvignon Blanc, and it's delicious. Gruner Veltliner, so primarily from Austria. We do see some really cool versions here in Washington, Oregon, up in BC, and then even in Finger Lakes region of New York State, if you're on the East Coast. It'll have some similar grapefruit, pineapple, really fruity, sharp, zesty flavors. But then Gruner is also known for almost a slight green spice or a white pepper. So think radish, green lentils. I hear some people talk about horseradish even. Like it can be pretty spicy. So that would be something that might not be super similar to Sauv Blanc, but similar enough that you might enjoy it. Albarino, beautiful, beautiful wine from Rias Baixas in northwest Spain. So this is Galicia, just north of Portugal. Very similar floral notes, citrus notes. You can have that minerality, the sort of rockiness that you might find in Sauvignon Blanc from different parts of the world. And depending on which sub-region in Rias Baixas it comes from, Albariño can be very floral or very mineral, like sea spray and seashell. But honestly, I've blind tasted Albariño wrong many times and called it Sauvignon Blanc. So these are very similar grapes. And then the last part of each of these will be a feeling adventurous moment. So these are some other grapes that you can keep an eye out for that might be a little harder to find, but are definitely worth the try. Ferment, dry ferment from Hungary. So this is a grape that's usually made into a sweeter wine that you might recognize called Tokai. But they do have dry styles of it that are delicious. Vermentino and Friulano, both from Italy. Vermentino sort of mostly from the central part on the East Coast, on the Adriatic Sea. Friulanos from the north. Verdejo from Spain. They actually make Verdejo and then we'll blend it often with Sauvignon Blanc, so you'll have some really similar flavors. And Xarel·lo is an also really cool grape from Spain in the Penedès region. It's one of the main grapes used in cava production. So cava being a sparkling wine, and it's what lends the acidity. It gives some acidity to the cava grapes that are used in cava production. But you can find dry styles of Xarel·lo that are really, really fun. So you like Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, same grape, different language. But Pinot Grigio, when I think of Pinot Grigio, it's a pretty neutral wine. It's something that's very drinkable, very quaffable, but it's not super aromatic. It's not super boozy. It's not super acidic. It's kind of just a nice medium plus all around, really, really, really drinkable. But these are some other options that you should try out. Chablis. Again, this is not necessarily an unfamiliar grape because this is just Chardonnay from the Chablis region in France. And it's specifically when you can get that unoaked style of Chablis, like a Petit Chablis or just village level Chablis. It's actually very similar to Pinot Grigio. Super, super mineral. There's some, maybe yellow apple, green apple, some citrus, but very, very easy drinking. Pinot Blanc. So you can get this from France, but also there's a lot of local stuff here in the Northwest. It's actually genetically, it's the same exact grape that Pinot Gris is. Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Blanc are technically the same grape. They're just different mutations, skin mutations. So Pinot Blanc is the white-skinned grape, whereas Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris is a gray-skinned or pink-skinned grape. But they can be very similar in flavor profile. Gruner Veltliner, again, this is a grape that can be many different styles based on the sub-regions in Austria it is, based on how the winemaker treats it and the vineyard's specifications. But Gruner can also be pretty neutral, pretty easy drinking. Melon de Bourgogne, or if you're more familiar with Muscadet. Muscadet is a really popular oyster pairing wine. It's from the Atlantic coast of France at the mouth of the Loire Valley. Definitely a little more on the lemon citrus as opposed to your yellow apple, pear, kind of Pinot Grigio notes. But can have that same phenolic texture, can have just like a tinge of bitterness, which is something I actually really like about Pinot Grigio. There's a tactile sensation. And then if you're feeling adventurous, Vino Verde is also always a beautiful, easy drinking. I hate to say pool wine, but to me, these are kind of like wines when you're sitting by the side of the pool in the summer, it's really hot, and you might just want something really easy and simple and delicious. And Vino Verde is one of those wines. Pic Pool from France, we also see some of that in the New World in California and Washington. Super lemony, super tart grape, but also just easy drinking and neutral. Sylvaner from both Germany and France is great. And then Cortese, which is, if you see Gavi from Italy, there, and actually, yep, someone here has a Gavi. We'll talk about that later. Just really delicious, similar to Pinot Grigio. And then Grillo or Grillo from Sicily. So this from the island of Sicily in southern Italy can be very similar to Pinot Grigio. So you like oaky Chardonnay. I could have said Chardonnay, but since Chardonnay, again, can be like a Chablis style, it can be a little leaner and fresher. Let's talk about some of these richer white wines. So if you like that richer oaky Chardonnay, some things you might like are Grenache Blanc or Roussanne, Marsanne, or Châteauneuf de Pape blends. So these are all basically Rhone varieties or southern Rhone white grapes that are often mixed together and blended together. You can have they're very similar in fruit character to Chardonnay. A lot of times I will get more of this almond, hazelnutty, nuttier, and like a waxier component, almost like honeycomb from from like Marsanne or Grenache Blanc, some of these grapes. But delicious, definitely worth seeking out. Viognier, which is it's the more floral version of Chardonnay, and again, totally depends on how it's treated, whether it's aged in oak. We're assuming, based on this, that it's an oaked Viognier, maybe from California or something, but definitely a richer, more textured sensation. Semillon, which is primarily grown in Bordeaux, and that Bordeaux style, and you'll see some of it maybe here in Washington too, that has a similar presence as Chardonnay, maybe a little more stone fruit like apricot and peach and some honeycomb. The one exception though is if you can find Semillon from Hunter Valley in Australia, that's usually a fresher, leaner style. So that might not be as close to a Chardonnay as you would assume. And then feeling adventurous, Viura or Macabeo. So this is, if you ever see Rioja, Rioja is a very famous wine region in northern Spain. They do make a white wine, and it is primarily made from Viura. They can blend in some other white grapes as well, but Viura is the main grape, and that can be, because it's Rioja, a lot of times it is aged in barrel for a long time, so it has really developed flavors, oxidative flavors, but just delicious wines. Sabatiano from Greece. This is what, if you're familiar with Retsina, which had a really bad rap for a long time because it's a wine that was aged in vessels that were sealed with pine resin, so there's some of this piney flavor. There's also some belief that actually there is kind of like a resiny pine flavor just from the grape itself. I think the jury's still out on that. I'll do a little research. But Sabatiano has this richer presence, kind of like Chardonnay. Trebbiano Toscano from Italy, Falanghina from Italy, and then Encruzado from Portugal. Some other wines that might have a little more robust presence if you like that kind of white wine. Let's talk red wines though. So if you like Pinot Noir, you like lighter style wines, maybe like fruity, some berries, some cherries, some florals, some herbs, really fragrant and just really nice, beautiful wines. These are some other ideas for you. Gamay Noir, which we talked about the last time we did this, which is primarily grown in Beaujolais. If you see a bottle that says Beaujolais on it, it's Gamay Noir. Which will have that same kind of mixed berry fruitiness, but also maybe a little more stems and herbs. Nebbiolo, which is kind of a tricky thing to suggest here because Nebbiolo can also be very high tannin, high alcohol, but it is a thin-skinned grape like Pinot Noir. And in certain places, certain Barbarescos, but also in places like Gattinara or Valtellina, there's other places where you can have a fresher, lighter style of Nebbiolo that can remind you of Pinot Noir. Senso is a really beautiful wine that's often blended. It's a grape that's blended in southern France with some other Rhone type varieties like Syrah and Mourvedre. It's used a lot in rosé production in southern France and Provence. But it's on its own. It's really beautiful. It's another thin-skinned grape. I think it tastes very similar to Pinot Noir. And you can find it also here in the States. In California, there's some really nice Senso up here in Washington as well. Schiava, if you get to see that, is a really nice wine from the Alpine regions in northern Italy. So some really nice there. And to me, it's just like even more vervy and electric than Pinot Noir. It's really high acid, mineral. It's really sharp, but really, really beautiful. And then if you're feeling adventurous and you like Pinot, these are some cool wines to seek out. Zweigelt and Saint Laurent, or Sankt Laurent if it's in German, both from Austria. Some really nice quaffable wines. Narella Mascalese, which is a grape grown on Mount Etna in Sicily. So we're back down in the island of Sicily in southern Italy, and it's grown literally on the volcano on the side of Mount Etna, which is erupting all the time. So you do get some more volcanic, maybe earthy richness from the wines, but really, really light hued, really fragrant, like Pinot Noir. Frappato, also from Sicily, but from a different part of the island, which is, I remember it just tasted like raspberry yogurt and like cherries, and it's just gorgeous. Trousseau, you have Allyaniko, a pretty rare grape from the island of Crete in Greece. Trousseau from Jura, and then Fresia, which is, I had a friend who often called it the angry strawberry wine because it tasted like strawberries, but it was pretty high tannin. So it had this pretty aggressive nature, but can still be very, very delicious. Um, if you like Syrah, is still it's gaining ground. I've actually heard recently there are some people that are really starting to like Syrah. They're tasting it more. Maybe we're just biased because we make some delicious Syrah, and Washington is known for great Syrah. So I think more people are familiar with it at least, or have had it. And if you really do like Syrah, these are some other things to check out. Mourvèdre or Monastrell, how it's known in Spain, where actually the grape comes from. It's often blended with Syrah and can have that similar meatiness and that pepper and really dark fruits. This is also the main grape of Bandol in Provence, so the Mediterranean coast. It'll have a little more red fruit as well, but very similar. Petite Syrah, there's a reason that the Americans gave it the name Petite Syrah, because it's petite, it's very little berries, but it reminded them of Syrah because of the flavors, that black and blue fruits, very inky, very peppery. Mencia, or Mencia from Spain. This is close to Rias Baixas, so northwestern Spain. This is also pretty similar to Syrah, but also maybe a little bit lighter. So some people think it's actually more like a cross between Pinot Noir and Syrah, and maybe it's a Merlot. It's medium-bodied, but has a similar kind of spice profile. And then Alicante Bouchette, not necessarily a normal grape that you might find, but I thought it was interesting to point out. This is one of the very few Teinturier grapes out there that is made into the wine. And Teinturier basically just means that it is a red-skinned grape, but it also has red pulp. So the inside, if you cut a berry of Alicante Bouchette, it's actually red on the inside. There's Saperaves is another one that's made into wine pretty often in Georgia, but there's not a lot of Teinturier grapes out there. But this is something that also has some elevated peppery notes that might remind you of Syrah. And then if you're feeling even more adventurous, you can stick to Portugal and have Castelão and Touriga Nacional, which is a little more structured. We'll talk about that with some other grapes a little bit later, but some really cool sort of black fruited and spicy wines. Sagrantino, which is from Umbria in central Italy. Schioppettino, a very peppery, out of all the wines, this might have some of the most black pepper flavor in the grapes from northern Italy. Negrettes from southwest France can have sort of a Syrah-like presence. And then Zinfandel or Primitivo. Zinfandel is tricky because, again, it's one of those grapes that can be grown in a lot of different styles, and depending on the winemaker can be almost more like Pinot Noir or Grenache, but it also can be pretty spicy, pretty rich, maybe like a Malbec or a Syrah. So you like Merlot, which I hope you do, because I love Merlot. Merlot is great, and we won't mention the movie because it's terrible. I mean, the movie's great, but it did terrible things. But if you like Merlot and you want some other things that are similar to it, definitely grab Malbec. It's another medium-bodied wine, plummy fruits, and has that sort of maybe little floral component that Merlot can have. Malbec to me also has this iron pan, or this, metallic's the wrong word because that can maybe like turn people off, but it does have this cool kind of irony flavor, and it kind of like electrifies the wine. Malbec to me is something that's very, very vervy, very, very exciting. So definitely try Malbec. Multipucciano. So this is a wine from central Italy as well. That honestly tastes very, very similar to Merlot, but it's Italian. And to me, when I think about Italian reds in general, you have a little more herbaceousness. There's some dried herbs that, to me, when I smell an Italian wine, almost all of them smell like that herbaceous. So this Multipucciano is like a Merlot, but made in Italy. Tempranillo. So again, back in Rioja. Tempranillo is a thinner skinned grape. It's thinner skinned than Merlot, but the way that Tempranillo is often made is that it is oak aged, and pretty extensively too, if you are in Rioja or Toro or some other regions that make it. And so it has more developed flavor, and often can assume this medium body, this rich, plummy cherry fruit that you might get with Merlot as well. And then if you're feeling adventurous, you can try Ayoritiko. It's a Greek grape. I think it means the grape of Saint George, Ayoritiko, for George grape. Negro Amaro and Nero d'Avola, both from southern Italy. Nero d'Avola is actually also in Sicily. Valpolicella, which if you think Amarone, it's like Amarone light, so not the really rich, intense Amarone wines, but the same grapes, Corvinone, Corvina, some other grapes blended together to be like that. Nero, we already said Nero d'Avola. Carmenere, or sorry, Bonarda, so another Argentina grape that's very similar to Malbec and Merlot. Carmenere is tricky from Chile because Carmenere it's very herbaceous. What it's known for is like almost blueberry fruits, like blue and black fruits, and then a lot of bell pepper and green notes and herbs and green peppercorn. So it's like Cabernet Franc in some respects, but it also is like Merlot, especially when it's cropped well and it's not too green. It can taste a lot like Merlot. And then Blaufränkisch is another grape I would recommend that's similar to Merlot. It's called Blaufränkisch in Austria. It's Lemberger in Germany. All right, and then lastly we have our cab drinkers. So if you like Cabernet Sauvignon, you probably like mouth drama, right? You like tannin, you like big, bold, spicy wines. So if you're thinking tannin, you got to think Tannat. Tannat is mostly grown in France, but also it's the main grape of Uruguay in South America. We're seeing some cool versions of it in Oregon, in Southern Oregon, in the US. But definitely a really intense experience if you like that kind of drama. Petit Verdo, so this is one of the main blending grapes of Bordeaux. You will see it in Bordeaux-style blends. But you also are starting to see more full varietals of it. And that can be very full-bodied, dark-fruited, black fruits, blue fruits. Petite Syrah, again, because I think when it's not too peppery and when it's treated with a bunch of new oak, it can have a similar presence that Cabernet has. And then if you're feeling adventurous, Ondaribi Belza, which is one of the grapes in the Basque country in Spain, so northern coast near Bilbao. It can be a pretty intense, rich, bold wine. Sagrantino from central Italy. Again, Touriga Nacional from Portugal. Allyaniko, which is maybe a cross between Cabernet but also Nebbiolo. It's got some Nebbiolo-type characters, really high tannin, but grown in the volcanic soils of southern Italy. Carmenere, again, how it's treated can be kind of Cabernet-like because of that mint eucalypt sort of bell pepper connection. And then Lagrange from northern Italy actually also has quite a bit of structure and presence and boldness. So that is your quick guide to some other grapes, some other varieties that you might want to explore at some point. But now, I thought if you all were willing to, and if you did grab a wine that you wanted to share, something that you might not have had before. Oh, and thanks, Casey. I didn't have the chat box open, but trimethyl dihydronaphthalene is TDN. Thank you so much. Now I don't even have to fact check it. That's perfect. But yeah, that is the TDN that's in Riesling when we were talking about the petrol notes. That's the compound that you can find in the grape skins. So, all right. Well, since just so I don't have to keep talking, does anyone want to volunteer to share what grape or what wine they are enjoying right now, and we can talk about what it tastes like, and then maybe what you think, maybe what it's similar to, or what you like about it, or what you don't like about it. It's also okay if you don't like these new wines that are a little more adventurous. Don't all jump at once. All right, how about Robin and Mark? They seem ready. They have a white wine here.
Right. Well, there's just a little Italian grocery store right near the house that we're renting on the Cape, and so this was one of the ones that was from one grape. What was the name of it?
From one, it's estate bottled. It's a Gavi.
Mm-hmm.
And
from Gavi, but
Cortese, right?
It's a Cortese.
Yeah.
And
well, and what do you think? Because I had mentioned that to being kind of similar to Pinot Grigio, right? So something that's neutral, has maybe some stone fruit, some apple fruit or citrus. But what do you think about the wine? What does it taste like?
It's interesting. It smells really a little bit sweet, but it's not. It's more dry. Mm-hmm. And it's a little acidic. It would be good. I think it would go really well with food. We had breakfast for dinner, so I don't think this would have been the right wine for that. But
I don't know. I think that could go with some French toast.
Yeah, I think the smell is very floral. but the taste is
more acidic.
More acidic.
Is it darker colored? Like, is it more golden in color, or is it pretty like light straw? It's hard to tell just with
Light straw.
light straw. Okay, because sometimes that'll tell, especially with white wines. It could, if you notice that the wine is more golden color or has sort of a darker hue, it could mean that it was aged in oak or in an oxidative environment. And a lot of times, especially for me, when white wines can often smell sweet to me when it's oxidative. Maybe it's because it reminds me of dried fruits, which can be a little sweeter, or something like that, or just riper fruits.
It does smell sweeter than it is.
Interesting. Well, so then on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being I love this wine, 1 being I wouldn't buy it again, what are you thinking?
Probably a 3. Again, I'd really like to try it with maybe some fresh fish from down here.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
So
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Do you want us to do our other one while we're here?
Yeah, you have a red wine also, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but this is more confusing. It's a Rosso.
Yep. So that just means red. So it's red.
But it's a
Rosso.
Ugola.
Yep.
And it's a blend, I think. But it doesn't really. It's produced on once again on a single estate. But it doesn't really tell us much information about the wine grape.
Of course, it says it's very rare. They only make 2,000 bottles. It's only made 7 places in the world.
So what? Can you read a little bit of the back label? Just the
It's from the same place as the other one, Marche.
The Marche. Yeah, that's the name of the province.
Yeah.
But read the.
It's well, other than the according to the Surgeon General.
No.
Product of Italy. They make the print so small that people our age can't read it. It's 14.5% alcohol.
Oh, that's a medium plus type wine.
But it talks more about, it says 100% Allyaniko estate grown grapes.
Ooh, Allyaniko? Is that?
Allyaniko.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's the grape. I think Allyaniko is the name of the
oh,
grape.
Is it?
Yeah, so that should be, I believe, 100% Allyaniko.
It is. A beautiful aroma of mountain rose petals and lavender, and a silky, soft texture of wild cherries, strawberries, and currants.
Wow, I mean, that sounds very exciting. Allyaniko, though, that's an interesting grape. So, at least from my knowledge of Allyaniko, is that most of the time it's made into a sweet wine. So the Allyaniko Pasito is sort of that sweeter style, one of the sweet styles, a way you can make a dessert wine from it. But it primarily comes from the island of Elba or Elbe. And even though this is from Marche, because they do probably grow it in some other places, but it is a very rare grape. And I think it's actually related to Muscat, or the Muscat family, which means maybe that has more of that florality or floral or really high toned aromas.
It says 7 wineries worldwide, 2,400 bottles worldwide. We're to eat it with risotto.
Oh, I mean, that sounds delicious. Maybe with some herbs too. I like floral wines with herbaceous.
Grilled meats, risotto, and antipasta.
Well, I mean, back labels are back labels, which can always be a little tricky and a little misleading. But no, that's cool. Allyaniko, that's actually a really, like they said, that's a pretty rare wine. I don't know if I've ever actually had a dry style Allyaniko before. The other cool thing about Allyaniko and Elba is if you also, for the history nerds out there, that's the island where Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled to. So it was known, like when he ended his life there, he was known to really enjoy Allyaniko. That was a wine that brought him some solace.
Yeah, that's the one that Renee picked out.
I picked it out.
Beautiful.
Solace with Napoleon.
Is it pretty fruity too? Like, do you feel like it's pretty fruity or fragrant and floral?
I do. It's dry, but it is fruity.
Nice, fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fun. Yeah, thank you. I love Italian wine, so I can talk about Italian wines all the time. Who's next? Who else wants to share a wine they have? Yes, Logan.
I am drinking corn from Grand Junction, Colorado tonight, but We have tried Chambourzen grapes, which is a hybrid from Western Colorado. It's I would call it kind of a Pinot Noir type grape, but with more acid and very tart cherry flavored. And it's I don't know where that fits in with the spectrum, but it's called Chambourzen.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have to look it up because I have had a Chambourcin before.
We had it at our house.
Yeah, I think I had a Colorado Chambourcin before. And it is a hybrid. So I wanted to look at what it is a hybrid of. It also, so here's another thing. It is also a Teinturier grape. Which I mean, so this is another grape that is red skinned but also red pulped. It's red on the inside. Most red grapes are red skinned but have white pulp on the inside, so you have to macerate the skins in order to get red wine color. Whereas this one is another one where the juice is actually already pink because it's red on the inside. I don't see exactly what the hybrid is, what the two parent grapes are, but it's grown all over the U.S. It seems like it was. I'm trying to figure out why they made it too, because it's probably resistant to either disease or frost or something.
Probably frost, cold weather wine.
I'll do a little research and put it in the follow up blog, the fact check, because I'm interested to learn sort of where that came from. But
I have not had any, but I understand from talking to some people this past week that it makes a very good sparkling rosé.
Oh yeah.
And I have not tried that. We also, in our recent ventures to Grand Junction, Colorado, so we're talking Western Slopes, High Plains. We tasted a wine that was a one of your Limburger grapes that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And wasn't, and maybe it was the winery we were at, but I was not that impressed. It was kind of bitter, and tannin, but
that's the thing. And I've had, and that's the thing about wine in general is there's no guarantee of anything. Like you could love Cabernet Sauvignon and try Cabernet from somewhere in Oregon and it could be terrible. Not that Oregon Cabernets are terrible, but but that's absolutely true. Because I've had some Lemberger, or there's some cool Lemberger and Blaufränkisch from here in Washington also that are really interesting, but like I wouldn't necessarily call them Merlot type grapes, even though I put it on the Merlot slide. So yeah, they're definitely a wide range.
I think that the reason they were growing it in Colorado because it's probably somewhat more cold resistant.
Yeah. That's great.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wine from Spain. It is spelled Texakoli, and they said it's a white wine, but what is it similar to?
Yeah, so it's called Chacoli. So that's also from the Basque region in northern Spain. So where that Hondarribia belts are and whatnot. It's so near Bilbao on the north coast of Spain. And Chacoli, it's fun. Chacoli actually I would say is pretty similar to Pinot Grigio or Sauvignon Blanc. So it's high acid. It's great with seafood. A lot of the food they have there is shellfish and fish and seafood. Chacoli, I forget the name of it, but it has a unique. Culturally, it has a unique way of serving it from this pitcher where they pour it really high and it kind of aerates it and froths it up a bit. But it's just a really refreshing white wine from that region, from the Basque.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, who else has a wine that they wanted to share that might be a new experience for them? Anyone? Oh, how about Nancy? Go ahead.
Okay. So you said you love Italian wines. So
I do.
Here you go. I have a Schiava. Oop, you can't read that, can you? But it's from Alto Adige. Yeah. And the winery is, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Abbazia di Novacea.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that that actually sounds great, but the label looks familiar. I think I've seen wines with that symbol on it. That's cool. Yeah. So Schiava, I put that on the So You Like Pinot Noir card. And Nancy is a wine professional here in Washington. So you taste lots of wines. So I'm interested to see what you think. Like, what does it smell like? What does it taste like? And what do you think it actually would taste similar to from other wines we might be familiar with?
Well, I picked it because I thought it would be a good transitional wine for this time of year because it is known to be lighter bodied.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite pale and light bodied. I get a little flintiness on the nose.
Yeah.
And it's a little more tannic than I expected. You know, I'd say like medium plus tannins.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, there's a little bit of plum, a little bit of like cherry secrets. But yeah, like very similar to Pinot, or maybe like even if you take a Nebbiolo and ratchet it down a little bit.
Right. Well, especially with that elevated tannin, which I feel like I've only had a couple Schiavas in the past, and I wonder how much of my opinion of Schiava is based on the producers, like the actual producers I had and how they make that style. But like I like you said, flinty, because one of the things I think about it is just how mineral and it can be, and just in that kind of really rocky alpine type of red wine. Like if you think of a red wine made in the Alps, to me it's like, oh yeah, it has a lot of minerals and a lot of verve and a lot of, you know, acidity.
Yeah, and it was $17, which I thought, you know,
yeah,
that's a great deal.
Yeah, cheaper than a lot of Pinots that you'll
For
find
sure.
on the shelf. So. Awesome. Wow, that's so exciting. Well, and afterward, or if you want, maybe you can even type in the producer, because what I'll do, I'll also put a list of all the wines that all of you shared afterwards too, so we could have a list of some of the new things. And if people heard you talk about that and want to get a bottle, that they know who what to get.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy.
Sure.
Yeah, Shelly, did you want to go next? All right, what do we got here?
Yes. So I have a Cappadocion wine. So it's Turkish wine. The grape is Emir, E-M-I-R. It's a white wine. It is very acidic. At first I thought it was just because, you know, it was my first sip of wine of the day, and it really made me pucker, but it still is making me pucker a little bit. It's got a lot of like lemon, so it's definitely kind of like lemonade-y, and then maybe some like pineapple, because it's kind of doing that thing to my tongue where like pineapple makes your tongue itch a little bit, you know? Yeah. So it's kind of got like a little lemon pineapple, so high acid. I don't know if I love it. There's not a lot of like body to it. It's kind of like really high acid, and then as soon as you swallow it, it's gone. Like there's not a lot of like lingering flavor or anything.
So not a lot of so maybe it's the kind of wine, because it's so acidic, they needed some way to balance it out with more body or more texture to get a little more finish.
Maybe so. It's not bad. I mean, it's refreshing. It's very, like I said, very tart, but not like particularly interesting.
So yeah, which kind of sounds like it's like a tart version of Pinot Grigio, maybe something that's like neutral, but or like a cross between maybe like Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio with that pineapple-y flavor. I mean, it also sounds like a good candidate for a little spritz on ice too. So
yes, I love adding my adding my LaCroix to my white wines when they're not particularly special is a nice treat.
There you go. There you go. That's a good way to do it. Awesome. So Emir, yeah, that's Emir, and I looked this up because I bought the wine for Shelly so that she would have something fun and new, and so I could try it later. It's one of the main white grapes in Turkey. So Turkey, it's hard to find Turkish wine, but there are a few stores, especially here in Seattle, that bring in quite a bit, and I'm seeing it more in the market. So it's exciting to see some of these new wines. You know what? I'll actually, I know there's maybe a couple others. I'm going to go next because I also have a Turkish wine, but this is a Turkish red wine. And this is Boyazkere. So that's that word that I had to look up the pronunciation for 5 times. But this is a red wine, 2017, from Dirin, is the name of the producer in Turkey. And this wine to me is, I'm going to say it's actually similar what Shelly was talking about. So for a red wine, it's definitely fruity. There's some plummy sort of red berry fruits. There is maybe a little bit of mineral sort of earthiness, but it also kind of, there's no finish. That there's some flavor up front, but then it kind of dissipates pretty quickly. So you have the initial flavor, but it doesn't linger. The texture is pretty thin, watery. There's not a lot of weight to the palate. And so like at the beginning, it kind of reminds me of maybe like a Barbera, or which Barbera to me can kind of be Gamay Noir-ish, where they have that like mixed berry and plummy sort of fruits. And it's really exciting, but then I'm kind of, I wish that it lasted longer, that there was a little more flavor. So, and who knows, that so much can also change the way a bottle tastes based on how it's stored. We've talked about too, like where it's been, how, especially when something's from Turkey and you're drinking it in Seattle, it's gone a long ways. So, but still super interesting, still super fun to try this. So, okay, so those are some Turkish wines. Tiffany, Spencer, did you guys have a new wine that you were tasting?
Yeah, so this is what we're drinking.
So let's see. Oh, Barolo.
That's
Tenuta.
a Nebbiolo, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, our palate isn't as refined, but I mean, I'd say it's like it's lighter to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it is like high tannin.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Which to me, it's kind of weird to drink like it tastes light when I'm drinking it, but then afterwards, like that mouthfeel seems not like a light wine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's totally. I remember the first time I tasted Nebbiolos and tasted Barolo, it was the same experience because it looks kind of like a Pinot Noir. Like it looks light colored. And it smells that way. It smells like it's going to be this really easy drinking. And then it's like, pow, and it just attacks your gums, and you're like, oh, that's a lot of wine. And it's funny because like I've now grown to really appreciate that and appreciate the drama of that, and see like how that can be really great, especially for food. Like, and when I think about Nebbiolo, I always think of the food too, because the cuisine in Piedmont, which is where most of the Nebbiolo is grown, is in Piedmont, Italy. It's a lot of rich food. They're making risottos. They have braised meats. This isn't coastal Italy. It's not necessarily your pasta and tomato Italy. It's like braised meats, a lot of rich polenta, things like that. And so having tannin, having like that more tannic wine can actually help match with a lot of the food. But that's fun. I mean, I hope you like it, and I hope you will try more Nebbiolos too, because it's another one too where when you find there's going to be some out there that will still have a lot of tannin, but they can still be pretty balanced and have enough acidity and alcohol where it's not as intense or not as apparent that it's just sort of attacking your gums.
No, I like it. At first, it took a second, but like the more that we drink it, like it, yeah, I like it.
I would have it again.
Nice, that's great. Yay for Nebbiolo. Oh, I love Nebbiolo. I want to go to Piedmont. That's all I want to do.
I absolutely love Barolo wines. They have they're like kind of like a Pinot, but they're like Pinot on steroids. They have so much more flavor, and they've got just a little bit more brownish type color to it than your typical Pinot does. They're great.
Yeah, that you're right. That kind of garnet, like brownish orange tinge sometimes to Nebbiolo, and I think part of that is the skins, the grapes themselves, but also a lot of times they are aged longer. Because they're so tannic, and especially way back when before they learned some more modern techniques of making wine, they had to age them a long time because they were so tannic. Because you had to mellow out that tannin somehow, and before they realized they could put it in new barrels or like breathing more oxidative environments through the winemaking process, they would just age it for 10, 20 years to soften out that intensity, that tannin. So a lot of times that can also give it that brown or that browner tinge to the wine. But yeah, super complex. I love Barolo and Barbara. Just all those Nebbiolo wines, Piedmont wines are delicious. Well, thanks everyone for putting in the chat what wines you have. I'll make sure that I have all of them, and I'll post them all. Appreciate that. So was there any other wines? I don't know if there's any wines. Did anyone else have any just questions in general, maybe about some of the grapes we mentioned while I was going through slides, or just anything about wine grapes? Yeah, Renee, you had a question?
Yes. So you have talked about how different wines and the different flavors and the different notes and everything. Is there a particular wine or note or flavor that you go for just personally? And is there one that you are just like, it's not for me? Why, based on the flavor profile and everything?
Okay. That's a good question. So I actually like, I like pepper. So I like the peppery wine. So like in that Syrah slide, a lot of those wines that might have I think both in reds and whites. One of the reasons I love Gruner Veltliner is because it can be this peppery, spicy white wine, and so it can taste like really citrusy and really fun and fruity, but also have this like lingering pepper spice, and I really like that. Grenache can have white peppers. Zinfandel, like we talked, has pepper, and I guess many times on this show at different episodes, I've said my two favorite grapes right now are Grenache and Cab Franc. And one of those reasons is Cab Franc also can have like a pink peppercorn or green peppercorn profile. So I think pepper might be it. But it's funny because like it's the same with food. I like chipotle pepper. Like if chipotle is anywhere on a menu, I'm probably ordering that off of the menu because it's got this. It's a mix of smoky and pepper, but I do like pepper flavor. If there's something that I'm avoiding or that I don't want, oh boy.
And I don't want you to if I know as a wine professional, you need to talk up all wines, but whatever you feel comfortable with. Obviously, you love all Avennia wine, but
there's nothing in Avennia wines that makes me that I like, so that's a given. But no, I think in whites, I'm not a huge fan of like bitter, nutty flavors. So and it's funny because sometimes Marsanne and Roussanne are grapes. For a long time I was very vocal, even as a somm, of how I love all wines and appreciate all wines except Marsanne and Roussanne, and it was sort of the thing that people would make fun of me for. But I've had some delicious Marsanne Roussanne. For instance, La Pearl, the one that we make, that's just gorgeous, and it's totally different than the other ones I've had. But I think it's because I've had those grapes produced in a way that almost draws out that phenolic bitterness, but also kind of this nutty richness from oak or just from the grapes themselves. And that's something that I'm not always in search of. Viura, like a white Rioja, aged white Rioja, can sometimes have that too, and it's interesting, but it's not something I'm gonna reach for.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fun question. I never really thought about that. Yeah, Shelly.
Okay, so my question is about rosé. You did whites and reds and some adventurous grapes to try. So I know the main grapes that people make rosé out of, Syrah, Grenache, etc. But what are some adventurous grapes that people make rosé out of?
That's a good question, and I'm torn to to not answer and make you come next week, because next week's topic for all things Avennia is rosé. But no, I'll still give you an answer. Yeah, so rose, because you can, honestly, you can make rosé out of any red grape. And honestly, you can even make it out of mostly white grapes and just blend a little red wine. So rosé can be made from a lot of different grapes. Primarily, it's made from Syrah, Grenache, Senso, some of those grapes, Cab Franc, Merlot, Cabernet. I've had Cabernet Sauvignon rosé before. Definitely Pinot Noir. Yep, Casey said Pinot Noir, Zinfandel rosé. Ooh, from Mexico. That sounds fun. But as far as other grapes that you might want to try, we actually had one the other day that I loved from Sicily, from Etna, that was made from Narella Mascalese. So Narella Mascalese, which is kind of like Pinot grown on a volcano, can make really, really great rosé as well. But I've had rosés from Bardolino. I think it's from Italy. You can have rosé from really, any of the red grapes that we had in the slides, you could make a rosé. Some of them might not be great because if it's structured in a way where there's too much tannin or something, and how you make it, because we'll talk about this next week. Rosé is really, really tricky to make, and it's tricky to make well because you have to keep things so really cold. It has to be a really quick process because you don't want things to oxidize. So no matter what it is, you have to have pretty talented winemakers making it. But I would say Etna Rosada, Narella Mascalese, beautiful. It's a good one to search out. Well, any other questions before we wrap up here, and say goodbye for one more week? No, this has been super fun. Thank you all for joining again. Thanks for sharing the wines that you brought. I hope you guys found some new stuff that you might enjoy, or maybe heard some things about wines that you want to search out. Again, I'll edit this video and it will be posted on our website, so that if you do want to go back and look at those slides for some of those other grapes to search for, that'll be there. Next week, like I just said, is going to be all about rosé. This is going to be our last episode for a while. So we'll talk about how rosé is made. Hopefully you will all grab a bottle of rosé, any style. It could be sparkling, it could be sweet, it could be dry. And we'll just chill, we'll have some rosé, and we'll toast the summer. So with that, I will see you all next week. And if you wanted to unmute and say goodbye, I always like hearing your voices. So everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Ellie Mae.